डू यू नो एक्चुअली द डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ फॉसिल एंड अ स्केलेटन? क्या को कर रहा है लाइक, ठीक है। तो ये लोग वो हैं जो गड़े मुर्दे उखाड़ते हैं. There was this one case that changed this world. Guys, and welcome back to Learning Forensic Science with Anchal Kapoor. So today we are actually starting up with learning anthropology. Since forensic anthropology is one of the important fields in the forensic science, but before starting up with forensic anthropology, we must know what is anthropology, what are the different branches of anthropology, and what all from anthropology is actually covered under forensic anthropology, since forensic science is an applied field, right? So today we are starting with the field of anthropology. So the word anthropology actually came from two Greek words, anthropos and logos. Anthropos actually means the man or the human being, and logos means to study. Anthropos means the man or the human being, and logos means to study. So if you see why I keep on emphasizing that these are two Greek words or these are two Latin words, how does it matter? Well, in the UGC NET exam, or if you are giving any competitive exams na, these questions might be seen and are very common to encounter, that these words are derived from which language or which not. So it's better to keep this in mind. So the word anthropology is derived from two Greek words, anthropos and logos. So if we broadly say anthropology, we can say that anthropology is the study of human beings. अब भाई ये तो बहुत ही वेग डेफिनेशन हो गई. वेग इन द सेंस कि ये तो बहुत बड़ी डेफिनेशन है. मतलब हम जो भी पढ़ रहे हैं, जो भी हम डिस्कवर कर रहे हैं डे बाय डे, बी इट बायोटेक्नोलॉजी, बी इट अबाउट टॉक्सिन्स, बी इट अबाउट एनी field that we are driving in and any field that we are discovering, it ultimately leads to studying about human beings only. How environment is affecting humans, how human is affecting the environment. It's all linked, right? So this definition won't serve. So a more scientific and a more systematic definition of anthropology, if we say, we can say anthropology is the scientific study. See the use of the word scientific here. So anthropology is the scientific study of, अब हम of के बाद देखना क्या लिख रहे हैं, origin, behavior and development of human beings. तो हम इसको एक साइंटिफिक स्टडी बनाएंगे. वी विल बैक दिस स्टडी विद द हेल्प ऑफ साइंस, ठीक है. तो साइंटिफिक स्टडी ऑफ ऑरिजिन. अब ऑरिजिन में क्या क्या आता है? ऑरिजिन इज नॉट ओनली अबाउट कि हमारे एंसेस्टर्स कौन थे, बट एक्चुअली अंडरस्टैंडिंग द इवोल्यूशन, ठीक है. हम कैसे इवॉल्व हुए, हमारे जीन्स कैसे आगे डेवलप हुए, और अभी जो हम ह्यूमन बींग्स हैं वो कैसे बने, हाउ वी केम इनटू एग्जिस्टेंस फ्रॉम आवर प्रीवियस ancestors and primates and before primates, how the origin of a living entity started. So origin would include our evolution, it will talk about our genetics and the related fields. When we talk about behavior, behavior encompasses a lot of different things, a lot of different abilities. Behavior में हमारा culture आता है, हमारे beliefs आते हैं, हमारी spoken language और which you can say mode of communication आता है, ठीक है, हम अपने इमोशंस को कैसे एक्सप्रेस करते हैं, वो सब हमारे बिहेवियर में आता है। अगर हम ब्रॉडली डिफाइन करना चाहें ना कि बिहेवियर क्या है, बिहेवियर इज एक्चुअली anything that we have learned in life rather than adapting it from our genes. So अपने genes से लिए हुए के अलावा, so from our genes we take the hair color, we take the eye color, we take the color of our skin, and many such characteristics are there. But apart from that, how we are actually performing in a social circle, that all encompasses the behavior. ठीक है, अब ये आती है बात हमारे बिहेवियर की। जब हम बात करते हैं डेवलपमेंट की, तो डेवलपमेंट इज़ अ वेरी इंक्लूसिव टर्म। डेवलपमेंट में हमारी फिज़िकल डेवलपमेंट आएगी, लाइक फिज़िकल, और यू कैन से बायोलॉजिकल डेवलपमेंट जो है, हमारी कल्चरल डेवलपमेंट, ठीक है, हमारी सोशल डेवलपमेंट, हमारी मेंटल डेवलपमेंट। Development has a lot of parameters and a lot of checklist. अब ये भी भैया बहुत ब्रॉड टर्म हो गई, मतलब ह्यूमन बींग्स के बारे में सब कुछ समझना, उनकी फिजिकल डेवलपमेंट, उनका बिहेवियर, उनका ओरिजिन, तो अब ये तो बहुत मेसी फील्ड हो गई, राइट। सो इन ऑर्डर टू सिंप्लीफाई थिंग्स अ लिटिल बिट, what was done was that this field anthropology was then divided into 4 major branches. So anthropology was divided into 4 major branches, and then they said, okay, these 4 major branches will help us in categorizing our learning, right? So the first branch was cultural anthropology. Then there is linguistic anthropology. Then there is physical or biological, or some may also call it biophysical anthropology. And then comes archaeology, right? So these 4 branches were then divided in order to somehow systematize our learning. But keep this in mind, these 4 branches are not very different or very well segregated from each other. So if you will go in a community as an emic or etic, I will explain you what is an emic or what is an etic. But if you go in a certain community, if you go in a certain place or certain part of world, and you understand what their culture is, how they are, how the upbringing of the children is done, how they eat, what is their way of preparation of meals, like what is their mode of communication, how good are they with the non-verbal cues, right? So when you will go about and learn their cultural anthropology, you would actually find yourself into knowing about their linguistic aspects also. So these all 4 branches are not very segregated from each other, but these 4 branches have been created just to make our learning a lot more feasible. So we will be talking about each branch. Now when we talk about cultural anthropology comprises of several different things. But firstly, we will start with understanding what is a culture. When we say culture, culture is actually a way of life that is shared by a group of people. In what ways? In ways that their belief systems are related, in ways that their values are related, their traditions, what art form they are performing, how they are making the food, what food are they consuming, right? What is their clothing, their social behavior. This all comprises under the broad term culture, under an umbrella term culture. So like whatever we do in a day actually, so we eat food, we freshen up ourselves, right? And we wear clothes and we go to perform a certain set of activities. That all is a part of our culture, right? Culture actually comprises of 2 main things. when we say culture, there are these two things. One is the non-materialistic things, one is the materialistic thing, right? The non-materialistic thing could be our language, our beliefs, and the materialistic could be the buildings, the tools that we are using, right? The how we are monetizing certain things, right? These all are the materialistic things, while the language, our beliefs, how we are communicating, that all is covered under non-materialistic things. So these materialistic and non-materialistic things are all in all inclusive under the term culture, right? So when we talk about cultural anthropology, it is actually a study of cultural variation, कि अगर हम एक कम्युनिटी से दूसरी कम्युनिटी को देख रहे हैं, हाउ आर दे कल्चरली डिफरेंट, व्हाट इज़ द डिफरेंस इन देयर वे ऑफ performing in life, in their way of living the life, how they are behaving with each other socially, how active they are in helping each other, how one's life is dependent on the others. It's a lot of things, right? So the key concept of cultural anthropology, like why are we actually understanding cultures, is that because cultures represent a unique adaptations to our environment and our histories. So since the human beings have been divided and spread to different continents, they have been living separately, how they have actually evolved to grow themselves, right? How they have actually adapted themselves to the different environments, and how that thing has changed the way they are living currently, right? So this is the key idea of cultural anthropology. Then the cultural anthropology actually helps us in exploring about the social structures, the family, the class, the kinship. Kinship is actually the term. If you go about searching kinship, kinship is about studying the social relations, right? Studying the social relations, like whether the two people in question, whether they are related by blood, whether they are related by marriage, or there were some adoptions, or in order, you can say kinship is mostly making a family tree. So a big family tree, if we go on making a big family tree, then it is called a kinship analysis. So the culture helps us in actually understanding these social structures, कि हम कितने लोगों को फैमिली कह रहे हैं, हमारा फैमिली का कॉन्सेप्ट क्या है, राइट? These are all the ideas that we have adapted from our previous generations, right? And we are following them and passing on to our next generations. Then we are able to understand about religions and rituals. So what are people performing? They are the people, they used to worship the mountains, they used to worship the rain, the water, right? The sun they used to worship. So what are their beliefs before that, and how they have actually came to a point of believing in those practices, right? It is all about religion and rituals. Then gender roles and identity, which are now currently changing actually. Earlier it was so much that the women used to be at home and the men used to go out and work, but now the gender identity, gender roles have actually broadened, and both of the genders are equally participating in work and family, like the homely chores, right? So a culture helps us to understand all of these setups, right? So when we say that a detailed account of culture, if we say a detailed account of culture is actually called ethnography. So ethnography is an in-depth qualitative study. So there are these two studies. One is a quantitative study in which we measure some things, that is measurable through certain parameters. But then there is this qualitative study which we can only describe. It is a descriptive form of study. So ethnography, it is an in-depth qualitative study, right, and systematic recording of human cultures. So very systematically taking the scientific backbone, this study is actually conducted where recording of human cultures is performed. What is done actually is that one person would go to different places and would record their cultures and would note it down, would make a diary and make it an entry, and that's how this study is performed. So when the person is going to a certain place and exploring about their culture, there are actually two types in which this study can be conducted. One is from the perspective of an emic and one is from the perspective of an etic. So emic is the research from within the social group. So if you are belonging to that social group, right, and then you take this initiative to actually research about all the cultural activities that have been going on in your community and you record it, then you are an emic. The person is then emic. But if you move out of your cultural zone and you go out to another cultural zone and then record and research about their culture, then you are an etic. So there is this emic related and etic related studies that are performed in cultural anthropology. Also, this word ethnography is different from the word ethnology. So the word ethnology is actually a comparative study. So it will take a comparison between two cultures and helps us to analyze what the differences are between two cultures and what are the similarities in between the two cultures, right? So there is this term ethnography. There is this term ethnology. We studied about emic and etic perspectives. We studied about kinship analysis and we studied about how cultural anthropology actually studies and actually takes into role the research work, right? Now we will move on to linguistic anthropology. Linguistic anthropology. How do people speak? How do they communicate their emotions, their daily chores? How are they communicating themselves, right? So there is this famous Sapir-Whorf hypothesis which states that language speaks how people perceive and think about the world. So लोग कैसे वर्ल्ड को समझते हैं, कैसे वर्ल्ड के बारे में जानकारी लेते हैं, वो भी उनकी लैंग्वेज पे डिपेंड करता है. सो देयर इज़ दिस हाइपोथेसिस, राइट. सो लिंग्विस्टिक एंथ्रोपोलॉजी में क्या होता है, इट एक्सप्लोर्स द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द लैंग्वेज, थॉट एंड सोसाइटी. आप कैसे बोल रहे हो, आपका मोड ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन क्या है, उसके पीछे का आपका थॉट प्रोसेस क्या है, राइट. और आप किस सोशल सेटिंग से बिलोंग करते हो, आप किस सोशल सेटिंग में पले बड़े हो, राइट. Showing how people use language to express their identity, how they build relationships, transmit culture across generations. So it's not just about you, it's about the generation before you and the generation that will be coming after you, right. So there are these speech patterns, there are these dialects, accents within the communities that matters a lot. So if we are living in India and we are speaking Hindi and then there is some Korean person out there speaking Annyeong, and you see how much of effort they put in saying that word, right? How much of effort or how much of force they apply, how much of emotions they delve into their languages, right? In Hindi, now when we say that there are difference in accents within the communities, that is also true. अगर आप एक बिहारी का हिंदी सुन लीजिएगा, है ना, और अगर आप वही हिंदी एक हैदराबादी की सुनोगे, ऐसे मच मच काय को कर रहा लाए रे तू, हैं ऐसे काय को करता रे तुम. So there is, it is Hindi language only, but how much of accent is varying from a Bihari person to a Hyderabadi person is completely phenomenal, right? You won't even understand at times. So there are these different things that connects us as community, right? Language is a part of our culture and language is our mode of connection. So even if you are in a foreign country and you find someone, like I am Punjabi, so if you find some Punjabi over there in a foreign country and you will be like, oh Paji kiਵੇਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ, and it will be a direct connection, like you won't even have to know that person. It's just that you, since you belong to a same community, you belong to a same culture, you connect easily, right? So language is a form of connection to people. It is a part of our inherent identity somehow, right? So there are these two major branches or two major areas, which are sociolinguistics, which show how language varies across social groups, right? And there is this ethnolinguistics, which shows how language reflects cultural beliefs and traditions. So you can say that ethnolinguistics is actually ethnography of communication. Ethnography क्या था? Ethnography was the detailed account of a culture, right? So ethnography of communication क्या होगा? Ethnolinguistics. It's just actually a term that has been given. So linguistic anthropology is not very much segregated from the cultural anthropology, but it is a different branch because there is a lot to study in it, right? And then comes our next field, which is archaeology. Archaeology is all about digging up, right? They dig up the soil, they dig up the several layers of soil, and they reach to a layer in which they can find some material artifacts which can reveal the culture or the mode of communication about our civilization that used to exist, right? आर्कियोलॉजी इज़ द साइंटिफिक स्टडी ऑफ ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री, ठीक है? तो ये लोग वो हैं जो गड़े मुर्दे उखाड़ते हैं, इफ़ यू नो, ठीक है? थ्रू द रिकवरी एंड एनालिसिस ऑफ मटीरियल रिमेन्स. सो दे वुड रिलाई हाईली अपॉन कि उन्हें क्या चीज़ें मिल रही हैं अपॉन एक्सकेवेशन व्हाट दे आर रिकवरिंग. सो इट कुड बी सम म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट, राइट? It could be a form of art, it could be some paintings on the caves, right? Whatever they are finding when they are excavating, which can communicate in some way what the cultural beliefs was for the past people, for the people who lived in the past, right? And how we can assess or how we can make sense of their lifestyle from it. Okay, aims to understand the past human cultures, their behaviors and societies by examining the physical evidence left behind. ठीक है? Archaeology is not relying upon any archaeology is not relying upon anything that is not supported by some material evidence. Okay, they need some proof to it, so they are digging up to find out the proofs, right? It integrates the methods from anthropology, history, geology, biology, chemistry. कोई भी साइंस का मेथड लगाना पड़े, ठीक है, कोई एक्सट्रैक्शन करनी पड़े, they would do to find out how the people used to live and how the people used to co-adjust in a community, right? So there are these different branches and there are these different fields, which is this prehistoric archaeology, ठीक है? Prehistoric, they have named it or categorized it on the basis of whether the writing systems were available or not at that time, like at the time for which they are searching, whether at that time the writing systems, the written material was available or not. So prehistoric archaeology is the time duration in which there were no writing systems available. So there were these dolls on the caves dancing like this somehow. जो भी, sorry, चूंच के बना दी मैंने, ठीक है? Some drawings, some alphabets, okay, some not even alphabets, something mnemonical to represent or communicate, right? So prehistoric archaeology, and then there is historic archaeology in which the written records were available. Okay, then there is this bioarchaeology. अब ये क्या करते हैं, दे स्टडीज ह्यूमन रिमेन्स को स्टडी करेंगे फ्रॉम आर्कियोलॉजिकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट टू अंडरस्टैंड द हेल्थ, डाइट, लाइफस्टाइल एंड पॉपुलेशन डायनामिक्स। अब ये बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है टू अंडरस्टैंड कि एट दैट टाइम, ठीक है, जबकि वो रिमेन्स आपको मिले हैं, जो आपको ह्यूमन रिमेन्स मिले हैं, ठीक है, उसमें नेचुरल वेरिएशन कितना था, ठीक है, उसमें सिलेक्शन फैक्टर कितना था, पॉपुलेशन डायनामिक्स समझने के लिए इट इज़ अ वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट फील्ड विच इज़ द बायो आर्कियोलॉजी, ठीक है। एंड देन देर इज जू आर्कियोलॉजी in which they focus on animal remains and they try to understand the relationship between humans and animals. They use the animal remains, right? Then there is this geoarchaeology in which earth sciences are applied to archaeology, which includes the soil analysis, remote sensing, geomorphological studies. Not much of our concern, right? But we will be actually studying about a bit about soil analysis with regard to archaeology when we will be studying forensic science, because when a person's grave is actually excavated, see, when the person is actually buried in a proper grave, na, there would be proper symmetry, right? There would be a proper position in which the human remains would be found. But if the skeleton or if the human remain was not buried properly, right, so there would be a difference, right? So you would be able to see while you are excavating whether it was a proper grave in which the person is found, or it is just an accumulation of soil over time and then you are excavating that, right? So we will be learning about this. We'll be seeing that if a person dug up the soil, how the soil's microenvironment changes, right? And how we are able to estimate that to find the location of a grave. There are many things, right? It is a very interesting field. Just stay connected, right? So there is this underwater archaeology also. There, when there are these shipwrecks or there are these coastal settlements. Shipwrecks? You don't know? Titanic? Yeah, the shipwrecks, the coastal settlements. तो जब भी आपको अंडर वाटर एनवायरनमेंट, अंडर वाटर हैबिटेशन समझना है, then there is this underwater archaeology. So archaeology is a very important field when we say from a forensic perspective also. Do you remember that World Trade Center's tragedy that happened, right? So from 2006 to 2013, 2006 to 2013, the entire span of years the archaeologists work in order to recover the remains of humans, the victims that have died in that tragic incident. So archaeologists in forensic science holds a prime importance in finding the human remains, or whether they are the cases of mass disasters, right? Forensic archaeology is a branch that we will be talking about in our next video, right? Moving on to our most interesting and the most intriguing branch, and my personal favorite branch in the anthropology, which is the biophysical, the biological or the physical anthropology, as we say. So when we say about physical anthropology, or if we are talking about biological anthropology, it's about studying the evolutionary aspects, the biological and the evolutionary aspects of humans, their ancestors and their related primates. So it's about understanding the evolution, right? How we have taken the physical form with the biological backing that we have now, right? So with the help of our genes, with the help of our population dynamics like population genetics, through mutations, through natural selections, right, through gene flow. So there are these terms that are commonly used in population genetics, which helps us in actually understanding how we evolved this far and how our DNA has actually accumulated certain changes over time to depict the physical characteristics that we encompass today, right? So it has many different areas to be studied. First is the human evolution. It talks about fossils and skeletal remains to understand, to decipher knowledge from fossils and skeletal remains. So a quick question here, do you know actually the difference between a fossil and a skeletal remain? Both seems alike to you? No, they are actually very different. So when we are talking about fossil, fossil is actually a preserved remain, any preserved organic remain. So it can be bones, it can be teeth, it can be shells, it can be any organic matter that has been preserved over time and that has been mineralized so as to retain the characteristic property of that particular uh, organism, you can say, right? But when we talk about skeletal remains are actually the when the person died within around 100-200 years ago, then whatever the bones that we will be collecting, that are covered under skeletal remains. But when we are talking about fossils, fossils are around a billion years ago also, right? So these are the preserved organic components from an organism that have been preserved and mineralized over time, right? Then comes the human genetics and variation. So analysis in different physical traits. ठीक है, हमारा स्किन का कलर क्या है, हमारी हाइट, स्टेचर इज द हाइट, द बिल्ट ऑफ एन इंडिविजुअल, राइट? हमारे क्रेनियल फीचर्स क्या क्या हैं, सो गोइंग फ्रॉम वन रेस टू अनदर. सो अगर हम एक निग्रॉइड स्कल, एक मोंगोलॉइड स्कल और एक कॉकेशियन स्कल को कंपेयर करें, would they be same or there would be some differences, because the race plays an important role and a distinguishing factor for establishing the identity of an individual, right? So to understand those physical changes that have arisen over a period of time is very important, and the field of physical and biological anthropology helps us to explore that, right? Then there comes human genetics and variation. Then there comes population genetics. As I told, there are these gene frequencies, hereditary patterns, there is natural selection, right? There is this evolutionary favorism. So whatever is best favored according to the environmental conditions, according to how the surroundings support, right? How the Mother Earth support the water, the air conditions across different continents, right? That can be explored, right? Then comes primatology. So primatology is the study of monkeys and apes to understand the human behavior. So it's all about understanding the behavior of monkeys and apes, like the primates other than the humans, and to understand how is their behavior different from our behavior, right? How we have evolved from them, how we have outgrown them, right? So it is a comparative study, not only behavioral but also anatomical, right? So then there is paleoanthropology. So paleoanthropology is the study of human fossils, right? Here throughout the evolution, we are not only stuck with the human fossils, we are looking for the primates and their ancestors, right? The whole evolution we were talking about. Here for paleoanthropology, we are talking about only the human fossils, billions of years ago, and how they used to look like, right? Then there is osteology. Osteology is strictly the study of bones. So you now know the difference between the fossils and the bones. Then comes this molecular anthropology. This is an emerging field actually. In molecular anthropology, what happens is with the help of the small molecules, which are the DNAs, proteins, right? With the help of these smaller molecules, human evolution, their migration, and their diversity is actually simplified, and it is actually understood with the help of DNA and proteins, with the help of micromolecules within the cell, right? Then there comes anthropometry. Anthropometry is a very useful and a very important branch of this physical anthropology that we will be using a lot during forensic anthropology discussions. It is actually the measurement of human body parts and dimensions to study the human variation range. What it means is that, do you know how criminals were actually identified back then when there were no fingerprints or when there was no facial identification system? How were criminals identified? What was the mode in which a record was kept? Systematically organized record of criminals was there. So earlier, when the fingerprints were not discovered yet, and it was not yet known that fingerprints do not change for a lifetime of an individual and they are unique for everyone, before that there was one French police officer who was named Alphonse Bertillon. What he did was he actually prepared a set of 11 measurable quantities, 11 measurable standards, and he used to measure those, which included the width of the skull, right, which included the length of the arm, the length of the middle finger. So there were several categories, those 11 parameters were there, and it was his hypothesis, it was the hypothesis of Alphonse Bertillon that no two persons can have exactly same categories, all the 11 categories exactly same. So it was a major tool used for the identification of criminals, especially the habitual criminals, when they were coming for different crimes with the different names, with the false identities. So if their name are changing and there is certain change in the looks, so they used these anthropometric measurements in order to identify the criminals. But there was this one case that changed this Bertillon system, which is actually called Bertillonage. Bertillonage. So it was, Bertillonage is actually the era in which Alphonse Bertillon actually used to measure these measurable quantities, right? The anthropometric measurements to identify the criminals. So this Bertillonage was ended by this one case, which was the Villain William West case. If you do not know, search about it, and if you want to know, we will be talking about in our upcoming videos. Don't worry. So I will talk about this fantastic Villain William case that actually changed how criminals were identified when they actually came to the jail, right? Then there is this field of anthroposcopy, which actually means the visual inspection of physical traits for classification. So anthropometry is the measurement, it is the mathematical way, it is a measurable quantity, while anthroposcopy is bit of a descriptive identification in which the physical traits are given some name, like the eye color is blue or the hair are curly, right? So some descriptive identification feature is used to identify some particular person, right? And then there is forensic anthropology, which we will be studying in detail, which is about identification of human remains, specifically human remains, and analyzing the trauma for criminal justice system, right? So this is all about the physical and the biological anthropology. We have discussed about all the 4 different branches of anthropology, which were the cultural anthropology, the linguistic anthropology, the archaeology, and the physical, biological, or called the biophysical anthropology, right? What is most important to us is this physical or biological anthropology, in which our forensic anthropology is getting covered, right? From the next video we will be learning about forensic anthropology only, right? So if you like this video, do like, share and subscribe. Follow for next video for more content. If you are preparing for UGC NET, please keep your notes updated, keep your knowledge progressing. All the very best from my side. If you need any help regarding anthropology or regarding any topic from my side, you can just write down in the comment section and I would be more than happy to reach you out. Thank you all guys. See you in my next video. Ta-da!